Autumn 2020, Nagorno-Karabakh. The crew of an air defense vehicle sits in a revetment on a mountain slope, and these men are doing everything right. The vehicle runs, the set is on, the antenna is turning, the screen is clean. 40 kilometers away, another man sits in a chair inside a warm container, looking down at that same vehicle on a monitor. He can see the tracks it left driving into the revetment. He can see one of the crew step away. He is in no hurry. He has most of a day of fuel left. In about a minute, this will be over. By evening, the video will be online, watched by millions. Here is the part that unsettles me. The vehicle under those men was not broken. It had not been abandoned or thrown together badly at a factory. It was working exactly as designed. It had simply been designed for a different sky. It took me a long time to accept that.
We are used to the idea that when equipment loses, somebody is at fault. An engineer cut corners. A factory saved money. A general did not think. Here there is nobody to blame. Here there are very intelligent people who gave a very good answer to the question they were asked in the 1960s. And then the question changed, quietly, without an announcement. This is the story of how the most expensive and most carefully considered part of any modern army lost to a machine that costs about as much as a decent car, and of why, looked at closely, it did not lose at all. We do not start with the drone or even the missile. We start with a problem solved long before either machine existed. Imagine you have to find an aircraft in the sky, at night, in cloud, 100 kilometers away. Your eyes are useless, so one method is left. Shout into the darkness and listen to what comes back. That is all a radar does. It throws a signal into the sky and waits for the echo. The trouble is that the echo comes back off everything. Off the ground, off hills, off forest, off power lines and wet rooftops, off rain, off a flock of birds. The radar does not hear one target, it hears a roaring crowd, and your target is a single whisper inside it. Picking an aircraft out of that is about as realistic as hearing someone whisper in a stadium at the moment a goal goes in. And then, in the middle of the 20th century, engineers found a way out. Very simple and honestly, beautiful. Do not try to understand the crowd. Throw away everything in it that is standing still or moving slowly. The ground does not move. Forest barely moves. A bird flies slowly. An aircraft flies fast, and its echo comes back slightly altered, exactly the way a siren changes pitch as a vehicle races past you. So the equipment can be set to ignore the slow world entirely, and what is left is precisely what you wanted. Everything fast. This is not a trick or a workaround, it is the foundation. Without it, a radar near the ground is useless. It drowns in reflections from our own planet. Every air defense system that ever entered service anywhere on Earth is built around that one idea, and it carries a price nobody thought seriously about for 50 years. If your equipment deliberately cannot see slow things, then to become invisible, all you have to do is be slow. At the time, that sounded like a joke. Who would crawl across the sky above an army where everything shoots? Slow meant dead. The only slow things up there were crop dusters, balloons, and trainers. The real threat was fast. Fighters, cruise missiles, and the helicopter that pops up from behind a hill for 15 seconds and hides again. So the engineers were given an honest, precise task. Shoot down fast things, preferably down low. And they solved it brilliantly. The 1960s. The Soviet Army asks for something that exists nowhere in the world. Not a battery with a separate radar, command post, and launchers that takes half a day to set up and then stays put. A single vehicle that finds the target itself, tracks it, shoots, keeps up with a tank column, and if it has to, swims a river. A monstrously difficult problem, and they solved it. The Army simply called the result OSA, the Wasp. But there was a price, and this is where it gets interesting. Because the real drama in the history of any weapon is almost never in the fighting. It is in the moment an engineer gives up the thing he wanted. A vehicle that has to float has a hard limit on weight, so the antenna will be small, and the electronics will be whatever could be crammed into that hull in those years. Cabinets of units that compute very slowly by our standards. And the smaller the antenna and the weaker the computer, the more ruthlessly you must cut away everything slow. Otherwise, the screen shows nothing but glare off the ground 3 meters under your own wheels.
There it is. The compromise that made everything possible 50 years later. To let that vehicle work at all, in mountains, in forest, on the move, it had to be made almost blind to anything crawling slowly across the sky. Not by oversight, deliberately. That was the price of being allowed to exist. Alongside it came a second machine, simpler and even more elegant. Strela, the Arrow. Its missile does not listen for an echo at all. It looks at heat. A jet engine is a glowing pipe, the brightest thing in a cold sky, and the seeker walks toward that warmth like a moth toward a lamp. See it, press, hit it. Again a compromise. Wonderful simplicity in exchange for one condition. The target has to be hot. Now look at those two machines and ask the question nobody asked in the 1960s. What if the thing above them is made of plastic, has a motorcycle engine, flies at 130 kilometers an hour, and is barely warm at all? That is not an aircraft, not a helicopter, not a missile. It is not even the category any of this was built for. A target like that was on nobody's list because it made no sense. A machine drifting along at the speed of a car on a motorway is supposed to be dead in the first seconds. By every rule there was. And the rules were not changed by aviation or by a new explosive. They were changed by two boring things: satellite navigation and a cheap camera. As long as you had to fly the thing by radio and keep it in sight, it stayed a toy. The moment it could know precisely where it was and send a picture 1,000 kilometers, a slow composite glider became the most unpleasant object that can hang over your head. It is not afraid of boredom. It can circle for 12 hours and wait for somebody below to make a mistake. Light a cigarette, drive out of the tree line, switch on a radar. Autumn 2020. 44 days of war in Karabakh, and the world sees what this looks like in practice. Azerbaijan uses Turkish aircraft and Israeli loitering munitions that pick their own moment to fall. But the cleverest decision of that war has nothing to do with drones. The Azerbaijanis take old Soviet biplanes, the crop dusters that spent decades spraying fields, remove the pilot, fit the crudest possible controls, and send them toward the Armenian positions, empty. Think about what happens to the man in the cabin of an air defense vehicle. He sees a target, slow but large and completely real, because a biplane is wood, fabric, and metal, and it reflects a signal beautifully. That is an aircraft, and it is heading for our people. He brings the radar up to full power, locks on, and does everything by the book. Perfectly by the book. And in that second, he stops being the hunter. He becomes the most conspicuous object on the entire battlefield, because a radiating radar is a lantern in the dark. Nobody has to search for it. It announces itself for tens of kilometers. And above him, something has been waiting for exactly that. Notice one thing. That crew does not even know they have already lost. You are beaten before you understand the game has started. The trick is not new. The Israelis pulled Syrian air defenses into exactly this in Lebanon in 1982. The difference is that in 1982, it took the full weight of one of the most advanced air forces on Earth. In 2020, a few converted biplanes were enough. And here it matters to be honest, because this war was turned into a conclusion far too clean. The Armenian side fought with equipment from the 1970s and 1980s, almost no modern electronic warfare, and no meaningful cover from the air. This was not a contest between equals. It was a demonstration of what happens when an old system is left alone against a target no technical specification ever mentioned. But that caveat is not what the world saw.
The world saw footage from above, expensive equipment burning one vehicle after another, and it saw it that same evening on a phone, not in an archive 30 years later. Video became a weapon of that war in its own right. There was an earlier warning that somehow woke nobody up. September 2019, Saudi Arabia. The largest oil processing complex in the world, covered by some of the most expensive air defense equipment on the planet. One morning, drones and small cruise missiles arrive, and within hours the country loses roughly half its oil production. Half, at one of the key fuel suppliers for the entire world. The air defenses were there, and they were superb. They were looking the other way, at a different altitude, waiting for ballistic missiles coming down fast from high above. What arrived was slow, low, and from a direction nobody expected.
Which tells you that defending against the unexpected is less an equipment problem than an imagination problem. And imagination is the scarcest thing in any large organization. The answer, as so often, already existed. It was invented before the problem became a problem. Through the 1990s and 2000s, Russia brought into service a vehicle built around a completely different thought. Do not shoot down aircraft. Shoot down what aircraft release. Missiles, glide bombs, everything once considered too small to bother an air defense crew. That is the Pantsir. Missiles, 2 rapid-firing guns, and a separate optical channel that looks at the target like an eye rather than like a radar. It can deal with something small from the outset and is not forced to trust the echo alone. Logically, exactly the answer Karabakh was missing. And it has a price of its own. Its reach is short, so it covers a spot, not a territory. It needs protecting itself, and it is hunted too, hunted with cheap things. The gun fires fast, but shells run out, and a vehicle carries a handful of missiles. When targets arrive by the dozen, the question is not whether you can hit them, it is how many you have. There is one more difficulty that is hardly ever mentioned. A big modern radar can notice a drone. Seeing the blip is not the hard part. Deciding what it is. A small, slow blip over a city might be birds, a weather balloon, somebody's hobby quadcopter, or a weapon that arrives in 40 seconds. And a human being has to choose, fast. Wrong one way and you take the hit. Wrong the other way and you have fired a missile over a residential district at a toy. Meanwhile, the most effective answer turned out not to be a weapon at all. The weakest point of these machines is not armor or engine. It is 2 very faint signals, the whisper from a satellite telling it where it is, and the link to its operator. Jam the first, and it does not know where to fly. Jam the second, and the man in the chair is staring at a black monitor. So the main weapon against drones became interference, not missiles. The most important victories of this war look like nothing at all. A drone stops understanding where it is and wanders off into a field. And in parallel, the thing that matters most happened. The idea did not stay with one side. Within a few years, machines that find a target and fall on it appeared everywhere, at every scale. Large ones the size of a small aircraft, flying 1,000 kilometers along a route loaded in advance, buzzing through the night sky like a moped. Medium ones that stare at one square of ground for hours hunting artillery. Small ones a soldier launches from his hand to look over a hill. And tiny ones assembled in a basement from parts bought online, with ammunition strapped on by cable ties. Today, both sides in Ukraine use these things daily, and both take losses from them. Neither can move a column or leave a tree line without asking who is watching from above. The drone stopped being anybody's advantage. It became the air that every war is now fought in. And here is the ending I cannot shake. An air defense missile is a very expensive object, a precise machine that lives for a few dozen seconds and costs as much as an apartment, sometimes several. That was always the design, because it was built to meet an aircraft worth a city block, flown by a pilot who took 10 years to train. And now what is flying at it is plywood, foam, and plastic, assembled in one factory shift with nobody inside. You can hit it, and people do hit it routinely, but you pay tens and sometimes hundreds of times more per hit than the target is worth. And your enemy no longer needs to defeat you, he only needs to make you shoot. Every successful launch is a loss on your balance sheet, and in a long war, the balance sheet decides as much as tactics. Which is why everyone is hurrying back to things they proudly abandoned half a century ago.
to guns because a shell is cheap, to drones that ram other drones, to jammers, nets, searchlights, and machine gun teams on rooftops. Things that 15 years ago would have looked like an insult to a modern army. So the drone did not kill air defense. No system became useless, no missile forgot how to hit. It did something else. It broke the arithmetic all of it rested on for 70 years. And one last thing. The people who designed that vehicle on the slope in Karabakh got nothing wrong. They answered the question of their time honestly, and better than almost anyone in the world. The question was changed without their involvement and without their knowledge, and the bill was handed not to them, but to 3 young men in a revetment on a mountainside. Maybe that is the real story of every weapon ever built. Not who made the better one. How long the question it was answering stayed the same.